we'll call the meeting to order at 6:30. Okay, we're live, folks, at 6:30, and we're going to call the meeting to order. Before we get going, though, I think a lot of encouraged cost cutting people in the United States in some of these areas. You know, what's happening in some of these grocery stores areas. It's just a tragedy what it is. But anyway, I just wanted to pass that up. And we have regrets from Township. She will not be here today. So with that being done, I'd like an approval of the May 16th meeting. Moved by Linda, second by Sherry. Any questions, comments on that? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Any conflicts of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? None. We have approval of the minutes of the May 2nd meeting. Moved by Kevin, second by Sherry. Questions? Doug, any questions?
No.
All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Delegations, Martha Embry will know. Martha, supposed to be present tonight?
She's joining via Zoom, your worship.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
That turns your thing off. You're not going to use that. See? And then this.
Hi, Martha. Can you hear us? Okay, we can hear you. We can see you. You probably won't be able to see council. I turned the volume up as loud as I can get, so hopefully they'll be able to hear you nice and clear, and we can hear you.
Welcome, Martha. Good to see you.
Oh, you just muted yourself.
How's that?
You're good. There you go. Okay. Well, floor is yours.
Okay, go ahead.
Is it muted or can you hear me good?
Yep.
Yes.
You're all right. Go ahead, Martha.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Hi, everyone. Can I go ahead then?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me this evening. As you see in the minutes, the first point I'd like to give a personal invite to all members of council to Stony Steps Art Fest. We're succeeding our own Maroons on June the 18th this year. I've got 60 plus artists lined up to come to the event, and I've got the lines, cooking, food, main course, and I've also got the Newburgh and Central United Churches doing a pie shack. The event, just a little bit of information with regards to the event. It's a not-for-profit event. So my desire is to open a bursary at the Lennox and Addington Community Foundation, whereby a student from the Township of Stone Mills each year would benefit from a bursary, post-secondary student. So I've initiated that with Bob at the Community Foundation. So that's the personal invite. My second point is with regards to insurance. Insurance is a bit of a challenge. The last year the Andersons did the event was 2019, and they had a cost of approximately $300 for insurance. I'm sitting this year at about $1,200 for the day, and that brings me to the next point, actually the fourth point, the request for financial donation. I'm looking to the Township of Stone Mills for a donation, and that's to offset the insurance costs and other costs associated with running the event. Even though each artist pays a fee of $100, there's still a considerable cost that myself and my family will absorb by doing this community event, which we would like to see as an ongoing event in the township for many years to come. Any people that are giving a donation, we're going to have a sign honoring them called Friends of Stony Steps, and those will be for the folks or the groups that are supporting us financially. Now, moving on to the next point, I was looking for some promotional assistance on the website as well as the social media, the township, and then the last point. We had CBO Denver and Public Works Manager Thompson come and see the site, and there were no issues to those, so that was good. So, would you have any questions at this point?
Any questions? You can hear us, can you, Martha?
Pardon me?
You can hear, can Martha hear the counselors if they ask a question here, Christina?
She should be able to. Can you hear them?
Okay, any questions, anybody?
I can hear you, Christina, really well, but read is difficult, you're a little muffled.
Okay, I'll repeat the questions as they're asked then.
Anybody have a question? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, hi Martha. I don't have a question directly for Martha, but I'm just wondering, Christina or Brian, what the insurance situation is. Could our blanket policy cover this event?
Through your worship, the insurance policy that we have in the past extended our insurance policy to private events, but those have been limited to our property. So in a case where the events are taking place on community facilities owned property owned by the municipality, we can extend coverage if those individuals are doing an event that we would typically do ourselves, if they're volunteering. I use the example of Canal Bash that's being operated by our firefighters on our property. They're able to access our policy. We would not be able to take the full liability and responsibility of this event off the personal property owner. There still is a requirement to have that insurance by the event holders or the property owners.
Go ahead, John.
So to Martha then, Martha, do you have a specific quote then to insure your event?
Yes, it's the latest quote I got was $1,200 and change, and then I got my fellow giving me some more information to see if we can get something cheaper for the events. We started out at $4,200, and we're slowly working our way down.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I'd certainly be willing to move that we contribute at least partially to that insurance coverage. I'm not sure what council thinks about an amount, because this is a good community event.
Go ahead, Brenda.
I would check. I would
You
second
made
that.
that motion, John?
Yeah, but I just want to hear what
Okay.
people think in terms of an amount.
Okay. Kevin, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Martha, I was just thinking to myself, I have a piece of property that I have insurance on. And I talked to my insurance because I had some folks there as it was basically a party or whatever. But I got a little concerned about what if somebody got hurt or whatever. So I talked to my insurance guy, and I ended up getting $2 million worth of insurance, and it only cost me $29 for the year to bump it from 1 million to 2. I'm just wondering, I'm wondering why it would be so high, but that's just what happened with me. So I was just wondering about it. So.
Right. I mean, yeah, I've been to my property for $5 coverage, and yeah, with this special events permit, I needed to get special $200 million coverage. I've got approximately 1,200 people coming. I don't have any control over the costs, and like I said, I started at just over $4,000, and I've been working my way down. And so I'm waiting until tomorrow, actually, because we're going to cover you into meet tomorrow with hopefully a better quote than $1,200.
You want to finish up, Kevin?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I'm in favor of getting anything we can brought into the township. I'm all in favor of that. Yeah, when you get a quote, then maybe you should have a look at it. Or like you get your final quote, or you say you're still trying to work at it, Martha. So.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I can submit you the quote that I get from Cal. I can submit it to the township, and you could view that. That would be much appreciated.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, there were several questions. Martha, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. There were several questions on your presentation there. I kind of like to go through them all and see what we can do. One you touched on briefly was the website. I don't believe that one should be an issue for us advertise this event there. I want to get it all out on the table, and then we can have a discussion. Okay? The other, you asked a question about picnic tables. Now, I'm not sure how many picnic tables we have left now that we don't run a campground, but maybe somebody can answer that question to see if, how many picnic tables were you looking for?
I'm looking for, approximately, well, I'm looking for as many as I can get, but.
Sorry, Martha, you cut out on that sentence.
Okay, I'm looking for approximately 10, or as many as possible.
Okay, so if we got 10, do we think picnic tables left? We have, okay. So, and then if I'm correct, the last question was, it seems as how legally we can't supply you with insurance. What can we do for donation wise to help you? Is that the 3 questions that you had?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're gonna already have a motion to see about whether or not we can make a donation to it. I fully agree. Ruin art in the ruins of Newburgh drew a huge crowd, and it's an excellent thing for the village, for the community, you know. So I would think if it's possible that if we can find 10 tables and could make them available to you or whatever, that would be fine. And, I don't see why we couldn't put this on our website unless anybody that would think that's accurate. Okay, so we can do that. So I guess the last question is, what kind of dollar figure are we looking at that we could make a donation of? So, Brian?
He has something about the website.
Councilor, so typically we've had a policy where we've only left the website for municipal initiatives. But our social media platforms, which is really the most covered one as far as sharing and getting the message out wide and broad, we can certainly share that event. So the only difference is we don't create that notice. Whatever the notice is that's shared with us, we share it. So that way it typically forwards them back to say Stony Steps Art Fest, or it takes them that direction. But our social media is definitely an avenue that gets lots of viewership, way more than our website. Typically, the people that are coming to the website are looking for notices about municipal events or council information or postings, etc. So,
Do you understand that, Marlon?
Absolutely, I
Okay, all right. Okay. So I think the only question is how much money did we put away for grants? It was at 2,500 like we did last year, that we have to share amongst different organizations. Can you update us on that, Christine?
Your Worship, the council donation line item is way larger than $2,500. There's a number of events. We factor an additional $2,500 that's kind of set for new donations. So that's where this funding would come from as approved by council.
John, Jim wants to know how much.
Go ahead, John.
Well, let's just keep it flexible in case Martha's negotiating skills prove even more effective, and say that we'll cover the insurance cost up to $1,200. Martha, if you can get it down to 900, so much the better.
absolutely, I'm trying to get as low as possible.
Yeah, sure. Is that agreeable?
Well, when you second that motion, you agree with that?
I do.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Everybody agree with that motion? Motion's carried. Justin, I'll say no.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, now that we've got all the nitty gritty out of the way, I just wanted to thank you, Martha, for the hard work that's gone into this planning of this event. Art Among the Ruins was near and dear to everyone's heart in this municipality, and it's really, really nice to see that you and your family have taken it on. And the bursary is just makes it even that much more special. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure for us, and since I'm no longer a municipal council, I have time to do such things.
Margaret, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, if we're gonna pay the insurance, whatever the quote you come with, you might better let us pay the insurance for you, and then we can save the tax.
Great.
Okay?
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Okay, have a good evening, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. You're welcome.
Your Worship, just to clarify, we haven't even decided the council received the valuation, which is the first part. Further, council approve a financial contribution equivalent to the insurance cost for the event, up to $1,200 for the Stoney Steps Art Fest, the use of up to 10 picnic tables based on availability, and authorize the sharing of information to the event via township social media.
Okay, I guess you've already agreed upon the motion, just hold it on what it is, okay? Good enough. Okay, we go to staff reports, we're gonna go to manager development service, Jason Samuels. My working. Working out, no license on mine, I just thought it was good.
So, just a quick, report to the council that, we're hoping to, put a, ad in the paper and advertise on our website, for a local farmer to, cut the hay, at Doyle Farm, which is growing right now, this coming summer, and likely we'll just, come back to council with a report, with the highest, the local farmer that's willing to pay us the most for those per bale. Just wondering what the council's thoughts around that proposal.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Are we leasing the farm as we did before, or is this different? My only problem with this was when I was reading it, if you had something like Hyperborea come back again and request that property for the weekend. The last time, I think the farmer benefited from it and the township didn't. And I don't want to see us do that. I think we need to leave it open, so if it's going to be used, the township taxpayers are going to get the money instead of a farmer.
Yes, through your worship, in this, latest proposal, we wouldn't be leasing it, and we wouldn't be getting into a long-term lease. We would simply be, letting a farmer cut the hay, as long as they could prove that they have the insurance. You can guarantee that.
Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, through you. The only thing that further to that, Councilor Richmond, from an information perspective is we've also included the ability for a renewal annually. So it wouldn't be a lease long-term, but it would also be negotiated because obviously there's fluctuation in crop pricing and hay pricing. So it would be something that we would be opening up to both parties of that agreement through this expression of interest at the onset of each summer until greater plans or confirmation of direction with that property is secured moving forward.
I guess one question I got is, for example, if Hyperborea come along, they won't be using that site. If we're leasing to the farmer.
It's a good question. Through Reed Smith, we've not entered into any commitments with Hyperborea respecting future events. We see the total of 38 acres that have been sketched here as tillable land that would be factoring into this. And if there was future conversation with Hyperborea with the usage of, say, a portion of that 38 acre as tillable, then it would essentially just reduce the total number that the municipality would collect on cropping based on plastic bales being collected.
Just to follow up on that, Hyperborea, I was out at the site there with Jeff one time up front. Did they take hay off those fields?
Yes, they did. After we did. It was early,
today.
1 week today.
Okay, we're gonna go to John and go ahead, John.
Yeah, this sort of solves one problem, but it creates another long term, and that's the soil fertility. You're not going to find a farmer that's going to take the hay off in 1 year, and it's going to turn around and put some fertilizer on it, and just hoping that maybe he's going to get it next year. So these soils are already pretty low in phosphorus in this area, so you're just going to be mining that soil. It doesn't matter for 2 or 3 years. Over the long term, that'll be a sadly depleted farm. So just keep that in mind.
Go ahead, Doug.
That was actually my question too. There's no, most farmers who want to crop the property for any length of time, i.e. put investment into it, they want some guarantees of years. You know, so I'm not against you trying this, but I agree with John that, we will probably end up with fronted fields. You have to give a farmer a long enough lease that he can recoup his investment in fertilizer. And it will be required on the land, I'm sure. You know, so we need to keep that in our mind. Get us through this year. I realize it's late, but maybe we've got to think a little differently as our wording for another year.
I guess just, I'm gonna go to Kevin, you follow up on that, to say if you rent it for, say, $5,000, and it's no bigger. The municipality, if we're gonna keep it going, we should be putting money back into that.
So that's the.
So if that's what you do like that, I mean, if we don't get nothing out there, I'm gonna anyway. Make sure it's put back in, not put the burden on the farmer, because he might not do it, come up by $4,000 back. Collect the rent, or pay whatever, and tell them that we will put X number of dollars back into people. Okay, I think, Kevin had your hand up and go, you want to?
No, you answered my question, thank you.
Great. Right, Kevin?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we're not handcuffing ourselves for like somebody like Glory or something else. As long as we're not doing that, I'm all for it. Let's utilize it and keep it down, because if you don't, you're just gonna end up with shrubs and whatever. But I wanna make sure that we keep it open for any event that might come along.
The way I read it is price per bale of hay, so it's nothing else, that's the only thing that's involved, is that correct? So if they get 100 bales of hay, they pay so much money, they get 200, there's no other attachments to it. So that we're not handcuffing ourselves.
I guess I look back at Kevin's point of view, when I was a farmer, I think when they're saying I need 300 bales of hay, and the first thing Township comes in, you can't have that 20 acres of crop.
Yeah, that's
I mean, I just talking about the other side of it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think though he did crop it, he just, he might have had some lots.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I mean, if you're gonna have something to know right now, I wouldn't be too favor of people coming this time of year, we kind of take a top 8 out. I mean, that's quite crazy. Right. Yeah. Okay, so, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, through your worship, just wanna, the lease was kind of done on a per bill basis, the former lease, and kind of working about $1,200 a year. So it isn't exactly a huge moneymaker, we're getting, I mean, it's not a very big farm, and the hay you get off of it, even when it is being fertilized, is not that great. It's pretty marginal. Another thing I was going to mention, that I was at a council meeting discussing the future of Doyle Road in terms of tree planting. Not that long ago, there was a motion passed for me to be back to council. After I met with local tree planting knowledgeable expert. That meeting hasn't been done yet. I called him after that meeting, if he wanted to be there with a shovel in his hand to actually visit the land and check on soil depths himself. Without just looking at charts made by the government years ago. And I actually just sent an email today requesting that meeting, and so that report is still coming.
Anybody else, anything? Okay, now to let the motion to receive the report. Moved by Sherry, second by Doug. All in favor? Motion carried. Manager Finance, Stone Mills Township, Accounts Payable, Christina Bouchard.
Okay, so what you have in front of you today is the accounts payable for the month of April. I don't have anything of note at the moment, but is there anything you need to expand on?
Any questions for Christina? If not, you have something, Kevin? I'll make the motion. Kevin, second by Sherry. All in favor of the motion? Motion carried. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
So CEO Brooks, Stone Mills Township, House Honoration Review, deferred till next meeting.
Your worship, before council considers this item this evening, if there's any directive from council as far as a vote goes, there is on the original report, there was an error that was pointed out by a very attentive ratepayer, and that is the actual cost of this commitment to council. So it was originally reported that it was just under $10,000. The factor of 5 council members at $1,100 per council member was not factored the same, and the impact is actually $14,500 As in the original report, it was only the 4794, the 3828, and then the 1179 for one counselor, but there's in fact there's 5. So I just want to make sure council's aware of the full financial impact of 14,520, because that wasn't the area that was listed in the previous report.
Okay, we have this in front of us. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I wasn't here for the previous meeting, for which I apologize, but I was feeling ill, and the next day I did test positive for COVID, so it's a good thing I didn't come.
Yeah.
But I did watch the deliberation, and I don't think anyone disagrees in principle with the idea of treating council like we treated staff. We're clearly well below average in terms of remuneration, and yet we are a considerably larger operation than many councils that pay at a higher rate. So it seemed to come down to, do we make this a current change, I suppose retroactive to the end of the year, or do we make this a recommendation for the following council? And I lean towards making a recommendation for the following council, simply because of the appearance of conflict. I think there's no debate in my mind about the amounts. They seem reasonable, they're average, not too high, not too low. But my feeling is we should make this something for the next council. In other words, treat these as positions rather than have any sort of personal immediate gain from the decision. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
I was just gonna say, I would second that if that's a motion.
I can make it a motion, I just want to hear the debate first.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my only, thought on that was the last discussion, was the fact that when we changed it for everybody else, or the other staff here, it was retroactive or made at that time. And, that's why I thought it was only fair that it be treated the same, as any of the others. So, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
But we've asked anything?
Well, yeah, I said, I mean, my thoughts haven't changed. I agree with John. Way back at an operation, we said we would not be the leaders in the area as far as wages. But we also said we wouldn't be the lowest either. We would be middle of the pack. So and when we review the numbers in front of us, we are below the middle, and it's only fair that they increase. So my thoughts haven't changed. I'm agreeable with the increase. The only concern I had last meeting was the timing of it. Okay. And I also thought that it should be a full council. And to be quite honest, I haven't changed my opinion. I would like it to be a full council to vote on this. Okay. And unfortunately tonight we're not full council. But I think everybody who's on council should have their say. Okay. On it. So, I'm all in favor of the recommended number. I'm all in favor of it for the new council, but I'd like to see the vote down the full council.
Okay, Linda. If you got something to say, you can have it.
My opinion hasn't changed. I did think a long and hard about this, and I actually waffled back and forth a couple of times. But I still contend that we should definitely give ourselves this increase that it seems to be very warranted. But I would like to wait until, I would like to vote on it now, but that it doesn't take effect until the new council comes in. It still feels self-serving, even though I know it's part of our job to look at money and how it's spent in this township. It just doesn't, it feels better. It just feels better to do it for a new council coming in rather than those that are still here. I don't know that I don't know that we need to postpone this. We haven't postponed these types of things in the past because people were absent. Although last meeting was postponed, John, because you weren't here. I mean, theoretically, we could go on like this for quite a while before we have a full council. I'm happy to call the vote tonight.
First, I'm gonna say something, the first thing is motion already on the floor, so we have to deal with that there.
No, I did make a motion.
Well, I thought you seconded.
No.
Wasn't if it was a
Oh, I'm sorry.
I said I want to give it a
Oh, I'm
discussion.
sorry.
Yeah, and I'm tending to agree with Doug here.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess, I'm gonna agree with Kevin, though. And I look back over the people here on got their raises within at the time. And it was the first month of the year, the last month of the year. If this happened in January, if it's been put off for next year, I don't know. That's the way I look at it right now, and I think it should move, at this time, we move on. We had a chap come up here a little while ago, and he was underpaid, he got retroactive back to the first year. That was in the last month meeting. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, if we're underpaid, if everybody's comfortable with being underpaid for the next 6, 7, 8 months, fine, but I'm not. So anyway, I'm in favor of that motion. There's no motion straight now. Yeah, but I think it should be done now. No. Next council moves in. There. Anyway, that's my stuff. So with that, I'm looking for a motion on the floor. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, I'm tending to agree with Doug because this is an important decision for all of the council to be present. So, once again, I'd like to see this deferred until we have the full council. Is there any time limit, Brian, on this decision?
There is no time limit on the decision. To Councilor Lyon's point, it is relatively impractical to defer decisions just due to absences, because in their absence, they're considered to be a no. If it was defeated with a no vote, a motion to reconsider is still an alternative. So it is not typical that you plan around all of council, but it's certainly council's discretion. If they see a possibility that that's the case, then they have the ability to defer the item again.
Well, let's defer it one more time. If council agrees, I mean, it doesn't really matter to me. I think the votes are fairly clear that we're going to pass this for the next council, just from what people say. So one more council here isn't likely to sway it one way or the other. But
Sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
I have to agree with Brian with certainty. I mean, if we come to a decision with council, person out here, we don't defer.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's something that's, we're going to tear buildings down, something,
Yeah.
you know, so
Something
something.
drastic.
Yeah, so if somebody wants to make a motion here, we'll move on to this.
Yeah. Well, I will move to defer it once.
Linda,
I'll second that.
all in favor? Motion carried. Stone mills. Manager of Public Works Emergency disposition of the stand. Field excavator. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry, Brian, you got another, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Your worship, as most council member probably recollect, we have a procurement policy that guides how the municipality will carry out certain processes in the municipality in the forms of RFQs, which is request for quotation, requests for proposals, along with tenders. Inside of our procurement bylaw, under section 10, we have a provision for group buying procurement processes. Typically in the past, we've did things like utilize the LAS AMO streetlight program. That was part of the group purchasing. We've utilized county programs for group purchasing. There are a number of agencies that are active and becoming more active on group buying procurement, some that have been confirmed by the province, some that have been confirmed by agencies. In the absence of a specific intent, we feel that it's transparent that we get a motion in front of council that basically authorizes us to utilize group procurement for the acquisitions of goods that would not require tender or otherwise, situations have to come to council for approval. In the event that we attempted to, the example that I would give to council is in the event in the past that we had attempted to use, say, for a plow truck, we would come to council and they would approve that decision. In the future, what you would see is a recommendation coming to council to utilize the group procurement process for the security of that truck as the tender process has already been completed by outside agencies should that come to council. The council decision is still ultimately council's based on the valuation of the assets that we're securing. But a number of the the group buying processes that are coming to light are on provincial group buying with regards to office supplies, group buying with regards to mechanical parts, all things that are on an individual basis regularly occurring overhead. And we would like to, with council's approval, list the notice of intent on the MERC site, the MERX site, which basically just indicates to vendors that we support and intend to use group procurement, so that we're transparent with any vendor that should be quoting on municipal services in the future. They would know that we have the intent to utilize group buying options as well. Some of the examples, just for council consideration, is OBRA, the organization that we all visited at the Good Roads. We received a session. Some of the samples on those were, we're receiving cat graders at 33% reductions, which is a massive discount, and typically our organization may not have been in the market to be able to afford a cat piece of equipment. With the group buying power, it may actually be something that comes to realization for future consideration. But again, that decision would come back to council stating that we intend to use that process. In all cases with group buying, it doesn't change what the valuation, what the requirements are for approval. All it does is it helps fast track the procurement process, where a recommendation will come forward early, recommending that we utilize this process and secure this piece of equipment. If we choose not to, we still have the ability to tender or go through whichever process we wish. Maybe it's the items that have been group procured is not specialized enough for the municipality. We still have the ability to utilize group procurement or do specific procurement if that's the desire of the decision at the time of whatever asset we're looking to secure. So there is no obligation, there's no fee to opt into these. Often the fee structure and the compensation as part of these programs is the actual vendor that was already successful pays the fee back to the group organization that has completed that procurement process.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, Brian, you mentioned MERC, but there are other organizations which we could also use.
MERX is actually the public bidding process. That's not a group procurement. There are a number of group procurements. Some are county, some are provincial, some may become federal. MERX is the site where you would basically post your tenders. And so by us posting a notice of intent on that page, it lets interested vendors know that we partake in that type of purchasing.
Right. Are any of these sites, just the information for, are any of these sites reverse auctions?
No. Okay. No, the group procurement that we're most notable with is the LAS AMO. LAS, the Local Authority Services Association of Municipalities of Ontario, do group procurement. And so one of the models that we saw at Good Roads was Canoe. Canoe essentially goes out and obtains quotations for asset security on the basis that there's 5,000 of those being purchased. And so from those numbers come economies of scale, and that savings is brought back into organizations that use that group procurement process. Because we are one of the 444 municipalities in the province, we comprise AMO, we pay our fees to AMO as we're a member municipality. They're acting on our behalf and carrying out those tender processes, which save us considerable time. One of the examples that were given to us, Councillor Davison, was from start to finish, the start of the research, the order of an Olympia in Arena was 3 days long, which is typically research, secure vendors, secure interests, start to spec out a piece of equipment, and then start to do your additions as to what you would like to have on it. There's a procurement process in different cases that has already did this for the municipality. If they wish to opt into it, the process changes where they bring the recommendation back to the council, seek approval under the procurement bylaw to spend that money, because the valuation of that piece of equipment would require council approval, and that's how that decision would go, rather than putting it out, having 3 bidders. And every group procurement has already gone through this process. So there's contracts, there's details of the award. All of those documents can also be there for the supporting information when it comes time to make that decision, just to show that they did their due diligence and completed that competition as well. So every process is very competitive.
Go ahead,
Okay, just follow up to that. This is a relatively new thing, and OLAS, we've done some work with them in the past. So is there some type of process, or what would you recommend? A year, 2 years for a review to see how successful this has been first?
So Councilor Davison, that's a very good question. Every year, you're required to post the notice of intent. So essentially, what has it did for us? You know, why would we opt into this? Why would we not? Has there been any pro, any con? And that report would likely be asked or provided at the time of renewal. We ask for that notice of intent. So the difficulty is, in some cases, we're not going to have a report that shows you what we would have paid had we not been in it. We're only going to see, you know, price reductions in what we actually spend. If it's not a price reduction, they don't change our account. But, you know, some of the examples are Michelin tires. There's a number of tire manufacturers that the tender and the specs have already been created. You can go on and check and grab this tire, and their associate party is like Cal Tire. So it's all commonalities of things that we already use. And the best part of the process is you can attempt to pick and choose. If there's a process in place that it works, and that's what we're looking to secure, we can utilize it. If we think that there's a better opportunity locally, we can also choose to go that direction as well. That's the benefit that's built into our group procurement, and we have the option to do that. So likewise, I use the example that the county has. If they go out and they do surface treatment, or they do any sort of large scale, they secure a price. Those vendors also give the municipality the opportunity to opt into it. By rights, I believe council should have an intent in there that indicates that we reserve the right to utilize group tender processes. So they'll know that we're opting into programs like that. There's 0 times that we opt into these without a perceived financial benefit to do so. Sometimes we can't secure a product, and the only time we can is by going into this group process. Again, that premium, if there ever was one, would have to be something that we'd have to weigh as part of that purchase. But typically, it's the opposite. They have availability, they're secured under that process, and we have to opt in to be able to make sure availability, because they're holding them based on that competition that's already had and already secured those assets.
Any other questions? We have a recommendation from us, moved by Doug, second by John. All in favor? Carried. Now we're going to make the Public Works Emergency Service Township disposition of loose end wheeled excavator.
Thank you, Georgia. Almost finally here. It's been almost a year since we ordered the new excavator. It's supposed to be in September, then March, and now it's here. So looking for approval to bring the machine in with 2 buckets. We have 3 buckets. We're going to keep one for the new machine that'll fit on it. And
Any questions? Go ahead, Linda.
I'm just making a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, second by Sherry. Jim, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just, for my sake, Jeff, we're gonna get about 90,000 on the trade-in for that.
80,000 and we have to charge tax.
No, what happens, Councilor Richmond, is we actually get 80,000, and then the purchase price of the new unit is discounted by 80,000, so we won't pay tax on that 80,000, so it ends up being 90,400. Whereas if we sold it outright to a different opportunity, we would have to get the 90,400 to realize that valuation.
And what was the new one, Jeff? What's it worth?
Well, you go back here to, what is it?
Okay. No, that's
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, a motion for everybody in favor of the motion. Motion carried. I just make consideration the 2022 Newburgh Santa Claus Parade. Go ahead.
Your Worship, you'll see inside this letter this evening, and we've been waiting for the right opportunity to put this on the agenda, and I may have faltered not having Councilor Thompson in the audience this evening. Typically, with the Santa Claus parades, we get requests for certain things. It's usually later in the year, but I think the Newburgh group is attempting to get a head start on this year's planning. So essentially, similar to what we did in last year, because all of the events take place on municipal streets and everything is there, they're looking to get the municipal endorsement for insurance purposes, as well as obtain security that they have assistance from the Stonewall Fire Department and the Public Works for traffic management and public safety. So I think through Deputy Fire Chief Deputy Fire Chief Richmond and Fire Chief Thompson, last year they were able to essentially do the rolling traffic control, work with the county on the rolling closure, as well as get the barricades and the equipment necessary to make this event occur safely. So I think they're just looking to secure that that information for this year's events as well.
Any questions, anybody?
Yeah, as long as staff's got no issue with it, I know it's horrible. I thought it went off pretty well last year, to be honest with you. The parade was too big for the village, but, other than that, it was excellent.
That would be the only thing that I suggest changing is the route. Just some of the larger vehicles that have trouble turning in the hall. You know, we've got through Main Street right to the top of the hill and the great ends there. People to go on left, go right, you go home or up over the hill, the great ends at the top of the hill. It's just a straight shot through.
Okay, if nothing else, then motion to see the report, moved by Kevin, second by Sherry, all in favor? Carried. Items for information, interim control bylaw regulation of medical and recreational cannabis production.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is just an item for information for this evening's agenda. As many of you may recall, it's been 2 years now, passed an interim control bylaw with respect to cannabis operations, both personally and commercially in the Township of Stone Mills. It's been a relatively hush topic since the passing of the interim control bylaw, which was really the intent of the bylaw itself. And as part of the legislative requirement, we're required to do the background study, provide an update of where we want to go as a municipality and how to regulate that use in the future. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide information with respect to where we're at with the background study that's in draft form, as well as the draft bylaw that will be held at a statutory public meeting on June 6th at our upcoming council meeting. We're planning to schedule a 5 p.m. start on the June 6th council meeting. It was sent out and published on our portal, but really the purpose of tonight's session for inclusion of this on the information for awareness of that. We've notified members of our community online to public advertisement, as well as in the newspaper, for garnering public input as to what they see fit for the inclusion or exclusion of our future regulations respecting cannabis. And there's been very limited information received. So just to give a bit more of a lead up time with respect to that public meeting, we wanted to make sure that that was good this evening.
Just type through this here, is this a medical license or not? What is it?
Through your research, it's everything. So it's to your extent of cannabis production facilities similar to the Appian type developments in Napanee, down to your 4 plants or lesser, which are permitted, through to a range of greater than 4 up to 25, all the way through. We're essentially proposing to introduce first and foremost a definition of cannabis, which is not defined in our current regulations, and then figure out how we want to regulate in this municipality separation distances from sensitive land uses like residences, schools, trails, cemeteries, churches, etc.
I guess to follow up on that, say if I want to go get a license, I got to get a doctor to sign it.
Yeah, through our regulation, we're not proposing any change to that structure. That's all provincial government regulated, right? If you have a doctor's a medical note for the number of plant growth that's prescribed to you, that's unchanged with what we're proposing. This is all just a proposal on regulating on individual residential lots.
But I guess the question is, if I want to grow 25 plants, do I have to go and get a physician, sign for, I can't do it for recreational?
I'm not an expert in the field, but it's my understanding that 25 plants would necessitate that, yes.
I mean, 25 plants, my God, somebody, the ordinary person can get that, that's a lot of work. My God, that's not the pile. Anyway, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I think for recreational use, you can't grow more than 4.
Okay, that's.
If you had a prescription, it would stipulate how many plants you could grow. The 25 planting, if I understand it, Jason, and I had a similar question, it's just us trying to deal with things like separation distances and provide little sort of benchmarks along the way.
I understand that.
Yeah. And may I ask something?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. You see here, in the draft and in the report, there's a lot of discussion about licensed facilities such as AFCAN, and they're all indoor. When there's an outdoor, supposing Health Canada gives permission for an outdoor growing facility, would that be, and we're talking obviously thousands of plants, would that automatically trigger in our draft by a 300-meter separation to the property line of a property that has an adjacent sensitive use? Is that kind of the summary of what you're proposing there?
Thanks, through your worship, Deputy Revised, that's correct, in that the differing based on 70 and 300 meter, but the larger exterior growing facilities, including, I said exterior, but greenhouse type growing facilities, would be that 300 meter separation distances, which is what the ministry stipulates as the D5, D6 series guidelines. And the reason, I forgot to mention that in my intro, that we originally put this sort of development on hold in the fact that the Ministry of Environment was updating, and MCT was updating their D series guidelines. They updated the guidelines. They had a request out for comment for updating guidelines. Municipalities across the province provided comment, and they never carried through with the ultimate update. So we're still with the 70 and 300. That's where those numbers are coming from. They still are in effect at the ministry level, and that's the reason they're pulled forward to this document.
Right, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I guess there's going to be maybe a challenge to this potentially by classifying cannabis grown at that level more as an industrial undertaking as opposed to an agricultural challenge or conflict. Do you perceive that as being sort of the basis of a challenge from the industry, saying we're an agricultural crop and you can't restrict us to an industrial zone?
It's a great question, Deputy Revised. I do. I perceive some LPAT case law being generated or that. I don't believe it's there yet. And the reason that we've gone back to IPI Group on the expertise on pulling this background study together is they've just recently done it and included that for some neighboring municipalities. Towns, for example, was one. So we used some of their legislation that brought into effect and successfully in some of those municipalities that weren't subject to appeal necessarily to the tribunal, but successfully adopted and was not challenged to date. But I would defer to Mark in being able to speak to what his opinion is on successful appeal versus ag and industrial, given what he's seen in neighboring municipalities. As you're aware, we haven't been there.
One more?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. And I guess the other potential challenge I see is from individuals who have prescriptions that would allow them to grow more than 25 plants, but they can't meet the separation distance.
Absolutely, and in that situation, Deputy Revised, it'd be no different than really the monitoring and or zoning amendment route that we would see in a non-cannabis world in terms of a setback distance from a sensitive industrial use, for example. So it would provide them an opportunity to navigate council's approval, for example, to seek modification to that provision.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I missed the date again for the open house. It was gonna be June.
I believe our next council meeting is June 6th.
You're gonna do it on the same meeting?
We're gonna, at 5 p.m., Councilor Davison, very similar to what we called planning committee meetings in the past. We have applications that will proceed for public comment at that time, and this is to be at that juncture. The reason that I've not scheduled as a separate meeting is there's been virtually no input received from the community in the year and a half in which we posted. We've gotten one piece of written correspondence over that term, and we've advertised multiple times. So I'm not anticipating significant comment, but of course, we wanted to provide that ability.
That concerns me a little bit to hear that, because unfortunately I've been through some other issues like this where the comments come after it's already in law, that people say, you know, and because I do have, for example, some real concerns with what I've read in here, especially around residential. I think it's 3A.1 and 3 or 4 talks about distances. And without saying where, but sometimes I go for walks, and there's a certain time of year that I can walk past a certain property and the smell will knock me out, and I can't see anything. So that has to be hundreds of feet away from where I'm walking. Okay, so I have real concerns with the residential portion of comments in here, just letting somebody go 25 or more plants. Half acre lot or whatever, like I'm really concerned that our numbers here protect individuals in the hamlet areas especially, rules of different kettle of fish, but well, you can't get distances enough away, and John, you touched on it, but about distances when they can't meet them. I don't know if it'd be the same as a dog kennel or what, you can't meet it, you don't have it. But we really need to do it. I think we need to look at the distances that are at least please give consideration to in that section 3 there of the proposal and figure if they're adequate.
I guess the thing about it with me is like you say, in the backyard, a person plant 25 years. Well, 25 years will do you. The 25 plants will do you 30 years of pot. When you look at the statistics plus what you get, let's just I'm going to read a couple figures here over here. But 25 years at three grams per day. That's what some war veterans get. Would do a person 11 years. And where's the rest of that pot going? I mean, that's the statistics. So I mean, somebody go and get a license, say I want to 5 plants. I'm going to plant 25. That's the scary part for me. I mean, this thing. 25 plants at 500 grams is 12,500 grams. Every plant would be 500 grams a year, and 3 per day. I mean, just go by some statistics. My big thing is 25 plants is a ridiculous amount, unless there's somebody holding the thing that's going to ship it out to a position. But if I go say here, I want 5 plants. My thing is where's the rest going to go? That's my concern. Anyway. If nothing else, can have a motion to receive the report. Moved by Kevin, second by Sherry. All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, we're going to have a progress report. Jeff, do you want to do that? Or this is both Amber progress.
Through your worship, I'll provide an overview from my perspective, and then Jeff will give us a much better detailed on the ground perspective of what's happening. So as we're aware, 630 County Road 4 in Tamworth is the location of our Tamworth Fire Hall. It's a Tamworth Fire Hall, and we have some very exciting development that's happening in that area of the countryside. In the fact that there's an affordable housing project underway, which has drawn the attention to our public works group as well as George Ben with respect to the creation of that road. So the road is well underway, and Jeff can get into the county money's management successfully conveyed for the construction of that bill. The zoning bylaw amendment that was approved by council has successfully been approved through the 20-day appeal period. Successfully concluded that period, and the lands are now sort of vetted and ready for development. CBO Detler has already issued building permits for the construction of those 2 builds, and that is anticipated to be underway in early June, I believe, next Tuesday. Okay. So before the end of the month, happening next week. So we're just on time with respect to getting that prepped. And as part of that on-site work, with regards to that road construction that Public Works Manager Thompson is leading, they had for a potential or the future Tamworth Skate Park has been factored into the on-site works. The leveling of that site has been completed, and I believe the putting of aggregate is underway. So there's been lots of activity with respect to 630 and 4, and Public Works Manager Thompson can likely expand upon that.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, we started there last Monday. We've got the entire road from County 4, the leg that runs to the east, all kinds of upgrades. We got ready to get this afternoon, obviously, around 1 o'clock. The parking lot for the soccer field, it's cut into upgrade, except for one corner is a little high. And Jason touched on the skateboard park. It's cut out the grade, and we started adding granular today, and we should finish by noon tomorrow with get up the grade ready for the next phase of whoever's coming in before them and do their job. Yeah, so things are moving well. Hopefully by the end of the week we'll have a layer of stone over everything. Word is that they're moving in to start floating next Tuesday, so we want to have most of our work, at least the sub base in place. And we're on our way to slow them down.
And just before we leave that point, on the screen is the reference plan, the survey for the actual county-owned parcel now. Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 detail the parcel, which has the shared entrance through the center, which would then come into the rear of each of the bills on parts 1 and 4. So the new road is north of that, but the lands themselves are parts 1, 2, and 3.
Those are the two building ones, and that's the shared entrance, correct? And then that's where the road comes across in front, or is that the?
Soccer pitch to the north.
Should be here.
Yeah.
Any questions for the chair on that dam or on the project? Go ahead, Ken.
Just a comment, I was by there today and I was really surprised to see that much stuff.
That much sense.
Yeah, going out of the state, I drove by it today, so.
We had a good week last week.
Yeah.
Just one thing for future meeting, we'll be coming back. Everybody knows what the prices are for gas pumps and the AC index, which is our oil and asphalt, our surface treatment, our micro. I anticipate the higher than increase for the asphalt for this project. Our surface treatment actually increased. I would have had a report, but we got notice on Friday. County Council is going to be getting something on Wednesday. So we went with their own, so Mills went with their own. The county and all the other lower tiers are staying with the current contractor they had, but there's going to be a significant increase with theirs. We're going to pay $320, theirs at $348, I think, per square meter. So that's up from $288 that we anticipate. So to our capital budget, which is a $2.1 million budget, it's about 63,000 increase. So either we cut off roads or we all try to absorb it in other places, but it's going to be tough with fuel rates going up.
Yeah, what could we do or whatever.
Sure. So once we get pricing back on the asphalt, we'll see what we can do between the two parking lots and the road.
Any more questions on that? You got anything else on? Yeah. That's it, I'll get it.
On that topic.
Okay, yeah, so you got another copy?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. So just to go get a motion. Ben?
Yeah, my.
Sorry? Any motion to receive that? Yeah, okay, moved by Doug, second by, all in favor? Great. Okay, go ahead, Jason.
I thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to apologize. As we move forward on item number 12, we've had 2 late additions to the agenda, and they're largely for information purposes. But I just wanted to make sure that we, sort of collectively as staff, wanted to make sure that the council's apprised of this information. Right? This, unless I flip the order. 12A in the agenda is correspondence received from Peter Doris at Omaka. I believe we're all familiar with Peter. Peter's an agricultural expert with Omaka, and he was heavily involved in the processing of Slack Family Farms site plan control application, in which we heard. There has been some communication that's been relayed among staff and some members of council around this table, but not all members of council, related to non-agricultural source material, NASM. And the reason for the inclusion on this at tonight's meeting is largely related to ensuring that all of council is apprised of the information that Mr. Peter Doris has shared with some of us at staff level, as well as some of us at the council level. The applicability of this on the Slack Family Farms operation, for example, is not directly correlated. Councilor Davis and I had a good conversation. This is non-agricultural source material, and the fact that this is not transporting of agricultural waste from one site to another site, which is what really initiated the conversation in the group, in the messaging and email correspondence related to Slack Family Farm. But this is an information in the slide deck that Mr. Doris has shared with Prince Edward County Council. And I thought it had some really good applicability and attached to someone else based on our similar site characteristics and shallow soil, sorry. So really the purpose for this inclusion is for the information purposes, and just to ensure that everyone's apprised of that communication.
Yeah, it's excellent information, but it didn't relate to the issue that was being raised. It's technically biosolids. So, by non-agricultural biosolids, so it's, for lack of a better word. And I know in the past, the industry and people like from the city of Kingston used to come and explain that stuff to us at the council. It hasn't been done in the last little while. So it's good information because you can still get that stuff to spread it on farm fields. There's just a process and an understanding of how it's done. It's good information. So it doesn't relate to the side thing.
Just a second, Brian, first of all,
Yeah, go ahead.
Just as a courtesy, Councilor Davison, and for council members' awareness, if there is a NASM, non-agricultural source spreading, we get notification of that from the ministry when that's utilized. So the one that we're most commonly familiar with is the one on Lake Road. We receive that notice from the ministry, we get indication in advance, and it spreads. So what I can share is we don't have that for this information, which would, to an average person, assume that that was not what was being put at that location. But that's, we get those notifications regularly from the ministry on approved locations.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that. Just to clarify, it isn't just sewage sludge. I think they call it non-agricultural source materials because it also includes things like scrap metal paper waste. It could include things like compost and yard waste on a small scale. So that's just a grab bag of non-agricultural source material. But I wanted to ask Brian, somebody had asked, do we get notified when this stuff is spread? And I didn't know. And then I saw in the slide deck that we do, and you just confirmed that. Roughly how many of those notifications would we typically get in a year?
I believe there's 2, and it's part of the same operation. So typically, if I'm being honest, we get the notification, and a week later we get a day full of complaints of the
odor.
Yeah. But aside from that, it's typically like other farming operations. It's calling into question the timing and the hot days and all the above, but typically it dissipates inside of three days to a week. So it's a good warning for us to know that we should anticipate the calls, but it's just trying to educate as much as we can on the approval process and the organization that oversees this versus the municipality.
And could I ask?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, Jason or Brian. There's been some, emails and online discussion and reports related to the slack line. But I had a question, and I've been meaning to call Peter Doris and ask him, but then I get sick and I get busy behind and stuff. Are nutrient management plans for farms, is that a public document? Because there's been reference made to a nutrient management plan and questions about specific provisions in the plan. Jake, do you know? Yeah.
Yes, through your worship, are you talking about nutrient management plans or nutrient management strategies?
Yeah, either one, but a plan, I think, is what is being approved. People don't really understand the differences there. Are either of them a public document?
I actually don't think they're public documents that you called or the ministry, NECP today. You have to go through and have freedom of information and to request to get that information. Right. So no, they're and another important note is that they change yearly.
Yeah.
A farmer will be spraying and this farm, this farm, and this farm, and then the next year he'll be spraying 3 different entire farms. So they're working documents as well.
Thank you.
I guess, they did some back on House Road or Payable Road. And I'm surprised the ministry let them do it. They knew we were gonna get a half inch of rain that night, and they started 6 in the morning. And I dare to say we're half that ends up in that creek. I mean, the ministry should have stepped in there and said no. I mean, it was that 30-acre field down in there, and it was just a pond. And like I say, people come into it, right? I criticize the ministry for not, especially when you were gonna have to train at night. I mean, it was, I got a lot of calls over, and I just said, oh, millions of full ministry guys. But, they should keep a little better tab on. Anything else on that? I got something, no, okay. You got anything else more? Okay, move on to the next one. Motion to receive that report? Same topic or no? Okay, then motion to receive that report. Kevin, Sherry, all in favor? Here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, sorry about that. Item 12B, again, my apologies, this is a late inclusion on this evening's agenda. We just received it as staff today in the closing from the lawyer that we were informed of was June 1st, so it wouldn't work obviously with our upcoming council meeting. So we wanted to make sure that we had that for consideration this evening. This is, again, more of an item for information with respect to an unopened municipal road allowance that I wanted to bring to your attention. So you'll see up on the screen on the left, 2 properties highlighted in purple, currently in the ownership of Wood. And these properties are changing hands, being sold, they're landlocked. It's actually in the PIN system, property identification number system, it's actually 1 parcel, because that road allowance that bisects the 2 properties is still, it's not in our name currently. The applicant is proposing a quitclaim deed to divest their interest in that section of road allowance to revert that back into municipal ownership, and then it would convey these 2 parcels the way they do show on the screen, not as they show in their PIN mapping system, as 2 separate lots. So if Chris, can you bring up the PIN map? Yeah, so that shows it as 1 PIN.
We can back to that other, I just don't.
Your Worship, so this
I'll say
is,
where.
I don't even know where it is.
this is the map. This is the map.
Where?
So this parcel in the system now is showing as though it's all 1 parcel. What they're proposing is that they would create, like they would give us quitclaim to the piece that goes through the road allowance, which will keep our interest in the continued road allowance. They would give up their right, and they would have two different parcels. To the other.
So it's still not, sorry.
That'd be how you're, I think, project there. Okay, just before I go through this, interrupt here, Mr. Kirkpatrick, here, so I'll come over. Just email.
This has nothing to do.
That's not that piece there?
It is, but it has nothing to do with it.
Okay, well, okay, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
It's 2 or 3 properties down.
Okay, go ahead, okay. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so just to be clear, just previously that road allowance must have been conveyed to the current owner and included in these, as to create one property, is that right? And they're giving us back the road allowance?
Yeah.
But regardless of that, the property or properties still don't front on an open, publicly maintained road, okay? Because I can't even see what the road names are.
Yeah.
What's that one coming from right to left?
Rogers Road.
Okay, that's Rogers
Rogers
Road.
North.
Okay, that's good. All right, and green, okay, yeah, I know where you are.
Sorry, I should have maybe started up here, my apologies. Rogers Road here, Green Road north-south, unopened municipal road allowance here, and unopened municipal road allowance coming through here. At some point, this was purchased by the current owner in 1980. At some point, this piece within of our road allowance was assumed to be owned by that owner. When they're converting from land title registry to land title absolute through the current process to convey this parcel to another owner, this has come up, and they don't want that to slow down their sale. They have no interest in this section of road allowance, and they want to essentially say, we'd like to convey any interest we have back to the municipality so that it's assured that you have that full function.
Go ahead, Doug.
My question would be, though, what benefit is it to us? I mean, I understand the benefit to them, it gives them 2 separate pieces of property of which they can sell. What benefit is a short piece of property basically landlocked to us? Because it,
Wouldn't be land. No, we.
well, there's, the road allowances obviously aren't even there, they're just running to a map. Yeah, I mean, that is probably due north of Tower Hill, I see where Cheryl Rollport used to live, and off the lake concession, and then it runs north, there's nothing there. Okay,
My only comment is I can't speak to the use, if you will, of what we're gonna have by owning this chunk. But I would say that it's more useless to own from here to here and not own this connection, to have this connection in the future.
so part of my question is, do we own the rest of it?
Yes.
Great, okay, so that's
Here.
another question.
Here and here.
Yes, then I can understand taking ownership.
Rather than Jason.
Yes, thank you, just quickly then, Jason, what size are these? Ultimately, 2 separate properties, assuming this goes through, roughly?
40 acres total.
Okay, so the one on the right is still larger than our minimum lot size. Okay, that's all I was concerned with.
Kevin?
Yeah, just to comment, I think by all means, we should retain it because we got it there now. We own, like you pointed out, most of the road, so yes, we should retain it and keep it for sure.
Go ahead, Jason.
The only other thing I forgot to mention that Public Works Manager Thompson mentioned to me is that there's no cost borne by the municipality for this process. This is a legal process in which their solicitor is a meeting, and that any of our solicitors' involvement would be covered and compensated by the private interest.
If you have something, go ahead.
Yes, were you looking for a motion? For your motion?
Well, if receives, if the motion receives the report. Doug?
Yeah.
Any more questions, comments? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, unless someone just came in.
I mean, you don't have to. Not from me, or it should. So we'll go to new business and statements from members. Doug, you have something?
Just a question, Cambridge Parkette, when would we, first of May is coming, can we start on that?
We just received low peaks on Thursday, so the plan is to start there on that Monday, so next Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, hey, Sherry.
Just a quick thing, can we have a quick update on the arena, if things are running on schedule?
Yes, these are actually running ahead of schedule. I was in there, actually, it was probably 2 weeks ago, and they had half the insulation laid, on the arena floor. I anticipate the installation's all down now, and I haven't been in there this week, but I anticipate that they're laying rebar probably right now. They originally scheduled like a late June concrete pour for that new floor. My guess is that they could probably move that up now.
Go ahead, Jim, or sorry, Doug.
I was actually in there today and, they are well ahead and I believe all of the installation is down. They're ready to, it was noon, so nobody was working, but, it looked to me like they're ready for rebar now. They should be pouring in a few weeks' time. Yeah. It looks good, they do their.
Almost, we've got the time of site meeting here. See what's going on. Keep somebody.
Looks good.
So, I mean, sometimes we'll just hard picking things right now or a day or whatever, but it goes right there.
Yeah, your worship, the only thing is, to your point, Councilor Davis, I'm not sure if you did this or not, but it's been requested that if we are doing a site visit, which I would like to see what's going on too, that we organize that with the site super, because I believe they're gonna intend to shut the construction project down. And basically, we go into the front doors, maybe go upstairs, but they'll remove any sort of barriers, and we'll get that bird's eye view without having to hard hat, steel toe, do all that. They'll make sure that there's a common corridor that we can be free from the construction area for. So, maybe 2 weeks from now, or something after the long weekend, a shortened one. And that's typically every 2 weeks as council, we have an extra week. Maybe we could get a date in there where we could get an opportunity to do, because I know there's some managers and staff that are working on the project from abroad that would like to see what they should be expecting as well, as far as financing.
Yeah, I was with the arena manager and we went in particularly at noon when there was no work going on and we just went in, quick look in the back area. So, because I did question what the safety, for construction safety.
Okay, I was in one morning with that guy and he said you got steel, I think I got steel boot, beat the whole road up like steel toes. Yeah, so anyway, I put it back up. Okay, good, but yes, sir.
Just the last, we brought up the slack farm a couple of times tonight during conversations. And I just wondered, do we have any mechanism in play that we could utilize to address some of the issues that have come forward in the recent emails that we've been receiving regarding the spreading and overspreading and supposition? Alleged, thank you, alleged. I use supposition, but alleged is all right too. I know when Mr. Slack dropped the nutrient values below 500, that we, or his stock, that sort of removed us from any oversight. But we are getting complaints now from our constituents in that area. And does that not give us some, I wouldn't say authority, but some purpose to explore or act on their behalf, or make phone calls, or can we do anything about that?
I guess, if they got complaints, why don't come to this table? I have not heard one complaint.
No.
Me neither. One complaint.
Okay,
Me neither. If they got a complaint, it should come to council,
okay,
as far as I'm concerned.
that's a good plan.
You know, I mean, I haven't heard nothing. I was actually to the bar here 2 weeks ago. And I haven't heard nothing. Well, John, you missed one time in that person there, or no tap road seat. That's the only thing I have heard. So I feel some people, they got some, that way, Jake, yeah, everybody, know what's going on. That's fair enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, Eric, I agree with that 100%, because you say that, but I have not received one email that I'm aware of, or heard anything about it. So, yeah, I agree. If they have issues, then certainly bring them forward, but you can't just pick and choose, send it out to certain people and then expect others to know, you know.
Negotiation in the, Jason.
Thank you, Worship. The only thing I'd like to reiterate is many of these complaints may be well received by administrative environment, conservation parks, and rural after staff. As Councilor Lund, you may or may not be aware, some of those staff members at those provincial ministries have been in communication form. And at the municipal level, we've been relaying on some of those concerns that we've received to that level of ministry jurisdiction. But if there's concerns with respect to, disregard to a nutrient management strategy from spreading operations perspective, at the local level, that's a jurisdiction of MECP. So we are in constant communication. John Harris is the agricultural officer, and Peter Doris, for example. But it's not as though any conversation or communication directly to the municipality can have direct reach to some of those nutrient management strategies that are under the purview of the ministry. And Deputy Revised can probably speak to it much better.
Yeah, I don't think it's illegitimate to bring forward constituent concerns if they have a concern and relay it through a councillor. They don't have to come as a delegation. Both Wenda and I and Jason have been in the loop, and Doug, of some community concerns, and I think it's perfectly legitimate to bring them to council. The problem is it's jurisdictional, as Jason has just said. This is under the purview of OMACRA and MECP. It's sometimes hard to keep track of which one is doing what. For example, we look at this non-agricultural source material policy, but it's different from spreading sludge from, say, storms. That's under a different piece of legislation, if I understand correctly, and would be supervised by different officials. So it's a bit complicated. The bottom line is, when we lost any sort of direct involvement in any agricultural operation as soon as they drop below that certain number of nutrient units. I mean, the community group was passionate and they had their view, and that's great. But in a sense, assuming it was their pressure that caused the slack operation to drop their number of animals, they kind of shot themselves in the foot. Because we had in the agreement that Mark Slack had signed on to a requirement through the Conservation Authority to have a baseline study of adjacent private wells so that we could start with a benchmark. 3, yeah, we don't have that anymore. I've been sort of hoping, and I've hinted, well, more than hinted, suggested to the group that they approach the landowners who would potentially have been involved in that water testing study to voluntarily set up something. Perhaps the municipality could get involved in some minor way with some minor funding or whatever to start some water testing. Then, if there was a significant rainfall event in early June after some manure had been spread, and then nitrate or bacteria levels in those wells went up, there'd at least be a correlation, if not a direct causation, and we have possibly a path forward. We have nothing now. So unfortunately, all I can say, and I can certainly engage in conversation with concerned residents about the science involved and the legislation involved as I understand it, and refer to experts when they don't. The argument is with the ministries. And from the get-go, when there's a barn that will be engineered to the highest construction standards. There's a manure storage that goes beyond the roof. There's no concern with those buildings short of an earthquake. It's always been about spreading. Proper spreading is really under the judgment of a farmer, regardless of if it's somebody spreading 3 acres of pasture with their horse manure, or a large industrial level piece of agricultural operation spreading over hundreds of acres. It's really in the farmer's interest from an economic standpoint to not overspread manure. It's a waste of fertilizer, and anyone here that's farming knows that the fertilizer has just doubled in price, literally doubled in price. would be a fool of a farmer who went and spread at a higher rate than was justified by the requirement of the crop. Certainly from an environmental standpoint, no farmer wants to pollute adjacent waterways or groundwater. It affects the farmer as much as it affects the residents. So I know about the ill feeling in the adjacent community and the suspicion, and there may be some justification for that, I don't know. But this is something where we could advocate as a municipality with other municipalities for more transparency under the various regulatory acts, for more on-site supervision by the environment and agricultural ministries, and what Eric referred to in terms of recent sludge spreading kind of indicates to me that there isn't enough on-site supervision. All we can do is keep rattling the bars of those ministry cages and saying, you've got to be on site when things are happening, when spreading is going on. You've got to check up that the nutrient management strategy and or plan is being adhered to. We ourselves have no direct involvement anymore in this specific project, in this specific operation.
Another thing about that too, John said, we himself as a farmer, I got a couple of days that I got time, I'll go down the river for 2 days. You know, they can say so. Most people have got jobs to do, and they're not gonna jump on it every little bandwagon, I don't think, because the guy that's trying to get something else moves down, up for that. I mean, it's hard to get people there, but I mean, people have a room to come shit, go and do, and they just say, you're not gonna go waste that kind of fertilizer, the other fertilizer now. But get your head up.
Yeah, just to back up what John was saying a little bit, and to agree with what you said, Eric, Lisa, I believe the complaints should come to council if there's complaints. Although we don't have direct authority to do it, we can't manage them, do it anyway. But at least we can do what Jason did, and that is to pass it forward. And then it's up to him after, to investigate and to prove it. And so the people that have the concerns, if they're legitimate concerns, we need to show the support for it, but we need to understand that there's a process that has to be followed.
And my own thing on that was too, to say, like Moose said, like I say, I heard nothing. I mean, it's quite obvious they're emails certain people.
I'm sorry, I thought your name,
Actually, I thought your name was about it too.
I had a company, I mean, I go down, we follow this, and like I say, I go to Lou, and like I say, if there's something that
the way this
you
thing
tell me,
works,
you're involved, should come here, that's all I just.
you and 7 other people, so I just said, what would the other 7?
No, I didn't, I thought.
Anyway,
was on the list.
that's the day I didn't get this. Okay, confirmation by law, moved by all in favor. Carried. Carried. All in favor.
So 5 o'clock then after the 6th, is that?
It was 2 council meetings, at 5 o'clock, and then regular meetings after. This is just.
It's a public